Listen, while I'm waiting on these people to accept the call on here, y'all go ahead and go to Google Classroom. If you don't have a Chromebook, go ahead and get you one. And go to Google Classroom. What you'll pull up on there is the Venn diagram. I'm going to give you the option. I've got paper copies, and I'm going to hand out paper copies. If you don't want a paper copy, when I get to you, just tell me you don't. We're going to fill this out. You can either fill it out, you can either open it with Cami and fill it out that way through Google Classroom, or you can write on this, okay? Because I'm gonna draw one up here, and we're gonna go over it on a board, what you're supposed to fill it in with. Now, like I said, if you don't want one, that's fine, just tell me, and then you can fill it out. But I expect you to still fill it out on the Google Classroom. You want paper? You want paper? No? Paper? 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 If you're gonna do it on paper, you can close your computer. Paper? 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 If you're gonna do it on paper, you won't need Google Classroom. Paper? Alright, so there are a few videos that I'll have on this. I will turn the lights off when we do those, just so you can see them a little better. Let's see if anybody. Alright guys, go into Google Classroom and pull up the Venn diagram, and you can open it using Cami, and then you'll be able to fill in. I'll turn it. You'll be able to fill in as I'm writing on the board. And I'll say it several times so that you guys have time to write it in. But then I will also make sure you have a copy of one that's filled out since you're online, because I'm going to write mine on the board. And then if you've got any questions, you can email me. If you don't get one filled out, you can send me an email. But for the virtual people that are on here, just follow along with us. I'm going to present my screen so that you can see the slideshow as we're going over it. And then just fill it in with me. I'll tell you what goes on it. And you can open it and use Cami, or if you've got a printer, you can print one off and write it in. Alright, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and draw mine. Alright, on y'all's first circle above it, you're going to put, I'm going to draw mine over here. Alright? First Continental Congress. Yes, put these on the lines. The first one will be the First Continental Congress. The second line will be Second Continental Congress. And we may, depending on how long it takes us to get through the First Continental Congress, we might not get to the Second Continental Congress. The previous class, we barely got to it. But if we don't get to it, that's fine, because we'll pick up tomorrow right where we left off. Some of the things that we talked about today will be a little bit of a refresher from what we talked about in the last lesson. So we'll do that. If you cannot see this, get to where you can, because I haven't put it on Google Classroom yet. I'll put it on Google Classroom after y'all leave, but I haven't put it on there yet. So if you can't see this slideshow, get to where you can. I know you can't see it, so you need to.
How do you type on these?
How do you type on Cami?
You have to make it. No, I kept that.
Get the letters?
I know they are.
Like I said, if you can't see it, so you three need to find a seat over here. That way you can see. Just while we're doing the slideshow. Alright, so we got the first Continental Congress versus the second Continental Congress. The start of the American government. Alright, the first thing you're going to put in the blanks are that it was held on, so, and you can write it in abbreviations, just make sure you've got it. You'll kind of know what they mean, but the first one was held on September the 5th, 1774. Alright, the first one goes in under the first Continental Congress. The first one was held on September 5th, 1774 in Philadelphia. You don't have to put Philadelphia, but make sure you know that it was held on September 5th, 1774. Alright, delegates to the Congress included colonial leaders such as Samuel Adams, John Adams, Patrick Henry, and George Washington. We talked about Samuel Adams, John Adams, and George Washington in lesson 2 previously when we talked about the Revolutionary War. Now, there are some things that we go over today that are going to make a little bit more sense for that, because some things that happened here led to the Revolutionary War. All right, many different viewpoints were represented at Congress. Some people wanted to break away completely from Britain, while others wanted to find a way to get along. All right, second thing you need is there were many different people, and y'all have to excuse my writing. Y'all know I don't write. I just get sloppy up here. If you don't know what a word is, just ask me and I'll tell you. Many different people. All right, this right here stands for with. That's my abbreviation for with. Many different people with various opinions, but no particular groupings. This is a G and then an S. Many different people with various opinions, but no particular groupings. And I'm going to keep going, but make sure you've got that written down, because you'll have plenty of time throughout the class to do it. Now, I've got a short video that we're going to watch. Will you hit those lights? Somebody.
Throughout the 1770s, Samuel Adams led Boston's resistance to British rule. Adams was aggressive, courageous, but slovenly. His friends often brought him presentable clothes when he left Massachusetts on business. In 1772, Adams organized committees of correspondence, which were groups of people who wrote letters to each other chronicling British abuses.
They started writing back and forth in the different colonies.
Yeah, it's going to pause every time he talks. It's going to freeze.
He worked up the whole, he worked everybody up into quite a state of anger.
Massachusetts boasted 80 of these committees, and by 1773, nearly every colony had a central committee to exchange ideas and information about the British with other colonies. These letter-writing committees formed the basis of the first American Congress. After the Intolerable Acts of 1774, which the colonists found unfair and punitive, the committees of correspondence sent representatives from each colony to Philadelphia to decide how to respond. This meeting would become the First Continental Congress.
The First Continental Congress was formed basically to affirm the union of the Americans and their united front against the British attempt to punish and asked them, and that they would all stick together, you might say, and maintain a united front against this attempt to impose second-class citizenship on Americans. That's what they felt was happening.
The first step, they all agreed, was a boycott.
What came out of the first Continental Congress?
Who knows what a boycott is? No. All right, Eugene, you know? You all right, Dalton?
Protest.
Do what?
Protest.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. Kind of like a protest. Anybody got anything to add to it?
It's like used to like put things out of something.
Like they're trying to change something.
Yeah, it is. It's really when you're standing up for something you don't want to do. When we're going to boycott like certain places, boycott their jobs because of certain situations. If they were made to do something that everybody doesn't feel like they should have to do, they'll boycott it. They'll say, no, we're not doing it. It's kind of like when you refuse to do something.
Was a boycott of British goods.
Some of you have even boycotted wearing masks after you've been told time and time again.
That was one way of making the British knuckle under the war. And also an agreement that there would be a Continental Association.
The Continental Association formed a pact among the colonies to start the boycott, to get England to repeal the intolerable acts and return to more peaceful times. The delegates set a date to meet again. The Second Continental Congress was scheduled for May 10, 1775.
Remember that day.
But fate would intervene before that second meeting. Battles of Lexington and Concord would spark the American Revolution.
All right, the First Continental Congress demanded the repeal for the illegal, intolerable acts and called for a boycott of British goods and trade effective December 1st, 1774. That's what the video just talked about. It showed you, just a little bit of what some of the protests, the boycott looked like. It looked like some of them were angry. Most people are going to boycott because you're not happy with the current situation. Congress also passed a petition called Declaration and Resolves of the First Continental Congress. This described the rights of the colonists and their grievances with Britain. Who knows what a grievance is?
It's like something they don't agree on.
It's a complaint. A grievance is a complaint. It is something you don't agree on. And in this document, the Congress stated that Parliament had the power to regulate colonial trade, but not the power to tax the colonies arbitrarily and without the colonists having representatives in Parliament. All right, so next thing you need to write down under the First Continental Congress. All right, they passed a petition. Passed a petition that explained the rights of the colonists and their grievances. Grievances is Grievances with Britain and Parliament. Alright, so it passed a petition that explained the rights of the colonists and their grievances with Britain and Parliament. That doesn't look like a W. and their grievances, GRIEVANCES, grievances with Britain and Parliament.
The PA.
PARLIAMENT. Alright, one of the most important actions of the Congress was a formation of a Continental Association which was in charge of enforcing the boycott. So enforcing the Continental Association, they made sure that the boycott happened. Following the meeting of Congress, the association assumed the leadership of the colonies. The delegates as a whole were not ready to call for independence, but were determined to uphold their rights. Alright. The last thing we'll put under this one, alright, is the delegates. The delegates were not ready to declare independence. They simply wanted their rights upheld. That's all they wanted. They just wanted their rights. Alright, First Continental Congress Congress agreed to meet again on May 10th, 1775, and if the King and Parliament failed to respond to their petition. So they decided if King and Parliament didn't respond to what they wanted, didn't give them the rights that they felt were theirs, then they were going to meet again. Parliament's response was British Parliament had no intentions of meeting the demands of the First Continental Congress. So they had no intentions whatsoever of doing what the Continental Congress wanted. They chose instead to use force to restore its authority. So that was part of what you saw in the video. Some of it was, British Parliament fighting back against the protesters and against the boycott. These events would further lead to the American Revolution. So we talked about the American Revolution in the last lesson. Well, here we're talking about it again. Even though we're kind of going backwards, this is one of the things that led to the revolution was the fact that, they didn't get their rights. They didn't get what they wanted, and Parliament said no. All right. Second Continental Congress, we did make it to that.
What's the last one?
Simply wanted their rights. Delegates were not ready to declare independence. They simply wanted their rights. Alright, so over on the Second Continental Congress, first thing you go right with, I told you to remember the date a while ago.
May.
It was held when?
May 1775.
May what?
May 1775.
May 10th, 1775.
Yeah, I said 17.
I know, I heard somebody say,
1775.
I heard somebody say 17.
She said 17. I said 75. You said 17.
Well, we got it right. Ain't no sense to argue. It's okay. May 10th, 1775. So, they met for the first time. May 10th. $1775. Alright, British had not yielded colonial demands and protests from the First Continental Congress. So, as they met for the second time, as the Second Continental Congress met, the British still had not given in to giving them what they wanted. Three distinct groups were present with opinions as to how to deal with the British. They were the radicals, the Tories, and the moderates. Alright, so the next thing, before we get to the video, the next thing is there were three groups. Alright, and these three groups, basically there were three political parties. There were the radicals, the Tories, RADICALS. Alright, and then the moderates. Alright, the radicals, Tories, TORIES, and then the moderates.
On May 10, 1775, almost a month after the Battle of Lexington and Concord, delegates from 12 of the 13.
We did that last time, for some reason.
On May 10, 1775, almost a month after the battles of Lexington and Concord, delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies, with Georgia to join them in July, met at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It was.
Alright, so did you hear him talk about the Battle of Lexington and Concord? That, we just talked about that also. So like I said, a lot of this is, we're going backwards a little bit, but because we're covering the same stuff, but then we're looking at, the Continental Congress is all, in the Revolutionary War, they're all tied together.
To be the Second Continental Congress. The first had met a year earlier. The delegates included such notables as John and Samuel Adams of Boston, Patrick Henry and Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, and Christopher Gadsden of South Carolina, all members from the First Continental Congress. Also present were Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, both from Virginia, and Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania. John Hancock, a powerful patriotic figure and merchant of Boston, was elected as president of the Congress.
But independence was not a popular word. The only man who had the nerve to say outright in public that he was for independence was Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin had recently returned from England, where he represented the colony of Pennsylvania in the British Parliament.
He came back from England. He gave up on the British and he hoped, persuaded them to be reasonable with the Americans.
After hearing about the recent events at Lexington and Concord, Franklin concluded the only action left was independence.
When he sat down in the Continental Congress, one of the first things he said was, "I am for independence." And he proceeded then to write his own Declaration of Independence.
Alright, so who did they say wrote the Declaration of Independence? He was the main writer of the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson. We talked about that previously. Like I said, I keep saying it over and over, but all of these things are tied in together.
Which most people don't know about. That was a very remarkable thing for him to say and do, because the rest of the Continental Congress at this point did not think they could win a war with England.
That June, following the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Continental Congress sent a petition to George III asking if he would consider working out an agreement to avoid further bloodshed. The petition was rejected.
So the king said, "Blows must decide who will be the ruler of this empire."
The Congress had no choice but to prepare for the coming war with England. In June, they created the Continental Army and appointed George Washington as the commander-in-chief.
Didn't they start with swords on them?
Yeah, I mean, they had the,
The baton thing?
you know, well, they had the guns with the muskets on the end. I mean, we talked about, that was the first question on the last test.
George Washington had the sword when he was like riding on the horse, but he didn't really use it.
That's because he was the one in charge. He was the
What's
commander.
that last word on your words?
Right here? Right here? Moderates, M-O-D-E-R-A-T-E-S. M-O-D-E-R-A-T-E-S.
Stop moving around so much.
Alright. Alright, so just like the video, we're gonna write one here. From the video. What they say from the video? What they say George Washington was named?
King.
No, not the king. He was named the what of the Continental Army?
General.
Oh, hold on. Did I hear it?
General.
Close.
President.
Close.
Column.
The commander in chief. Alright. I'm just gonna write GW. You can write George Washington. If you can remember it like that, then that's fine. George Washington was named the commander in chief of the Continental Army. All right, the radicals, that we're going to go over just a little bit about each one of these parties, okay? While you're writing this. George Washington was named the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. So, the radicals, all right, they preferred to call themselves patriots. They argued for a revolution and a final break from England. They were led by John Adams, Sam Adams, and Richard Henry Lee. They pushed for Declaration of Independence. Again, I'll ask you, who was the main writer? Thomas Jefferson. Other colonies, how many men did it consist of writing it? No. A 5-man crew. Alright, other colonists called them zealots of anarchy and dictators of sedition. Zealots is unwilling to compromise. Anarchy is state of disorder. Dictators is just like the ruler, just like who's in charge. Sedition is the act of attempting to persuade others to rebel. If you rebel against something, what do you do?
Go against
You
them.
go against it. Alright, the Tories, let's look at those. They oppose the radicals. If you oppose something, what are you doing? If they oppose the radicals, what does that mean? They were going against the radicals. They were also known as loyalists. They continually sought reconciliation with England and argued against separation. They had proposed plans for the colonies to be represented as an inferior and distinctive branch of the British Parliament, but they were voted down. Alright, moderates. Alright. Some of these guys wanted independence, but not at the expense of a bloody revolution. So, they wanted independence, but it sounds like they were willing to not get independence if they didn't have to worry about a bloodbath as far as a war. A lot of people died. It looks like they were willing to compromise and say, you know what? If this is what we've got to do to get it, let's just kind of back off. They were middle of the road people who were eventually convinced by the radicals that independence was the best course. Alright, June 16, 1775, George Washington was named the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Alright, so here's what we've got. I don't want to get too far ahead of the other class. I want to kind of keep you about the same. So we'll stop there for today. What we've got in store for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, when you get done with this class, you will go to your homeroom. You'll be in there probably, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes. You'll get your progress reports. Some of you will be happy to take them home, some of you will not. If your parents want to, tomorrow at 2:30, I won't be able to do parent-teacher conference till after 5:30. If your parents want to talk to me, they can call me, they can email me during the day, they can email me tonight, however they want to do it. I mean, we can talk tonight. They can call me, my information's on the school website as far as how to call and get a hold of me. If they want to do some type of Zoom or something where they can see me and I can see them, that's fine. They can call and I'll set it up and then call them back real quick, we'll do that. As far as some of you talking about the possibility of every Wednesday going virtual, we'll discuss that more throughout the week. That'll start next Wednesday. This Wednesday you will, as far as I know, start getting out about 40 minutes early. And then if we go to virtual Wednesdays, that'll start next week. You will still be required to be in the Go Guardian stuff. You'll take a Chromebook home from the school on Tuesday. You'll log into your stuff on Wednesday. I'll call you on the computer just like I call the guys that are already virtual. All right? And then I'll be sitting at my desk, and we'll do it that way. You'll get the Chromebook during 7th period every Tuesday, and then you'll turn it back in. I don't know if you'll turn it back in Thursday morning when you get back or Thursday afternoon. Do what?
I think they said the next day.
Well, you won't turn it in the next day because that's the day you'll be virtual. You'll turn it in Thursday.
Did she go to sleep?
No, she didn't. But you need to turn around and face me. Class is up here. You don't worry about her right there. All right.
What?
Today is September 28th. So this day in history, in 1928, bacteriologist Sir Alexander Fleming accidentally discovered the antibiotic penicillin.
I'm allergic to that.
Penicillin, when he noticed that a mold that fell onto a culture killed many of the bacteria. Who knows what penicillin is? Aubrey, what you got?
Oh, I tried some medicine. I've heard about my aunt talk from it.
All right, who knows a little bit more? All right, Addison.
It's an antibiotic,
It is an antibiotic medicine,
and I'm
but
allergic to it.
penicillin will cure a lot of stuff. Penicillin cures a lot of stuff.
And yet I have to take the other stuff.
Let's see, you got about 4 minutes left. So what I want you to do is, if you don't have all this written down, make sure you got it all written down. If you don't have it all typed up in your Canvas form, make sure you type it up, make sure it's saved, so that you've got a copy of it. Guys at home, I will make sure that you've got a copy of it. So that you'll have a completed copy. This is kind of just what it looks like up here. And like I say, I'll make sure you guys have it all completed, and I'll get it out sometime tonight. And you'll have one that's already, you'll get lucky, have one that's already submitted, that's completed for tomorrow too.
Coach, can I stop?